On December 4th, 1872, the brigantine Mary Celeste sailed out of New York Harbor bound for Genoa, Italy. Aboard were 5 crewmen and their captain, Benjamin Briggs, along with his wife and 2-year-old daughter. They were making the journey across the Atlantic Ocean to deliver a cargo of industrial alcohol. But it was a journey they would not finish. Exactly 1 month later, the Mary Celeste was discovered by another ship sailing through the same trade route, drifting aimlessly at sea with no one on board. Everything appeared normal at first. The supplies were all there. The ship had a full head of steam, and it was set to course for Italy. It was even still carrying the lifeboat, which would have been launched into the water if the crew had needed to abandon ship. But the crew was nowhere to be found, and neither was anyone who had sent them off from New York. In the confusion, investigators assumed the 7 crew members and passengers had abandoned ship in the middle of the night and taken the lifeboat with them. But that theory quickly fell apart when they realized the lifeboat was still aboard. To make matters even stranger, the ship showed no sign of having been in distress. The cargo had not shifted. Nothing had been damaged by rough seas. The logbook made no mention of any issues or changes in weather. The only clue indicating anything unusual happened was a partially eaten meal left on the table in the captain's cabin, suggesting the crew had just up and left without warning, abandoning their ship and their lives for seemingly no reason. But there are some things about this story that don't quite add up, like where did they go? In the year and a half since the discovery of the Mary Celeste, hundreds of ships had sailed these waters and none had seen the missing crew. If they had taken the lifeboat with them, why hadn't someone spotted them in the water or on some deserted island? And how could 7 people have disappeared without leaving so much as a whisper behind? Hi everyone. Today we're going to look at the disappearance of the Mary Celeste and ask the question, what if the most important clue in the case is the very thing everyone is ignoring? Is there a way the Mary Celeste could have vanished without actually vanishing? Let's find out. In 1872, the Mary Celeste was far from the first ship to sail between New York and Genoa. The journey across the Atlantic was a well-traveled one, though typically completed by larger vessels with longer routes that cut up the coast of Africa or South America. The Mary Celeste was smaller, traveling a more direct path, but also facing shorter tempests and avoiding the longer voyage. Her departure went without incident. Witnesses reported the schooner looking particularly lively as she set sail that morning, giving nary a hint of the disaster that lay ahead. For the first 3 weeks of the voyage, the men on board kept busy doing chores, mending sails and generally keeping the ship shipshape for port. But then the weather turned. Captain Briggs recorded winds growing steadily stronger and stormier, but he didn't expect it to get much worse. According to the captain's log, he had passed through similar storms before, and nothing like that had ever happened. So he continued on course for Italy. But on November, the wind shifted and the temperature dropped. A dense fog rolled in, thick enough to muffle the sound of the waves crashing against the hull, and it stayed that way for days. On November, the wind suddenly died down, leaving the Mary Celeste becalmed on the surface of the water. The ocean was unusually calm, almost eerily so. With not a sound to break the silence of the gray skies above or the black water below, it was on that day that one of the few oddities of the case occurred. As the lookout scanned the horizon, he spotted a steamer directly in the path of the Mary Celeste. He hailed the ship, attempting to warn them of their collision course, but the ship did not reply. He rang the bell for the lookout in the crow's nest to scan the ship again. Still there. He rang the bell again, and the lookout reported back that the other ship appeared to be drifting off course. There was something wrong with her, he said, for a ship should never move like that on such a calm sea. The Mary Celeste changed course to avoid a collision, passing within a few ship's lengths of the other vessel. As they passed, the lookout on board the Mary Celeste saw that there were no lights in the other ship's windows, and he could see no signs of a crew on deck. But it was too foggy to tell if there was anyone on board or not. He felt a sudden chill run down his spine, and he looked away quickly, hoping he wasn't coming down with something. That was the last anyone saw of the ship. When the fog lifted the next day, the Mary Celeste was alone on the sea once more. No other ships could be seen in the distance, not even the one they had passed the day before. Nobody on board the Mary Celeste knew what had become of the ship or her crew. Could it have been some kind of ghost ship, Well, perhaps. But there are a few key details that make us think otherwise. Like the fact that the logs for both the Mary Celeste and the ship she passed contain the exact same entries for November, meaning they were both charting the same course, which makes it unlikely that either of them could have gone astray or been caught in a fog bank. What are the odds of two ships taking exactly the same route by pure chance? It's very possible that there was some kind of mix-up here, but what if that mix-up was caused by something else entirely? Imagine if the ship had been sabotaged, not by another ship or human hands, but by an invisible force of nature itself. When you hear stories of time travelers, they are always changing the past. But what if someone could change the present? How would you know if someone had manipulated your own timeline? What if there was a way for someone to hide something in plain sight, to vanish into thin air right before your eyes without leaving a trace? If the answer is yes, then maybe that's exactly what happened to the Mary Celeste and her crew. Maybe the fog was no accident. Maybe the calm before the storm was no coincidence. Maybe someone wanted those ships to cross paths. What if the Mary Celeste had wandered too close to a place she wasn't meant to go? A tear in the fabric of reality that could swallow whole anything that came too close. Perhaps the ship that passed by was the same one from another time, a traveler who had stumbled upon the same anomaly and used it to flee to another place, another time. Now let's rewind a few years. In 1862, American inventor and businessman Henry Dirks joined forces with British engineer William Thomson, who would later become Lord Kelvin, to form the Electric and Magnetic Telegraph Company, or EMTC. Their goal was simple: harness the power of electromagnetism to send messages across the Atlantic Ocean, with telegraph lines already crisscrossing the United States. The obvious next step was to extend the network beyond the horizon. The project was massive, laying thousands of miles of cable on the ocean floor and securing it to anchors that would keep it in place. But it was fraught with problems. Not only was the Atlantic deeper than anyone had anticipated, making it harder to keep the cable in place, but it kept snapping, failing to reach the other side. One attempt was nearly successful, reaching 99% completion before breaking. But every failure was a learning experience, and each new attempt brought them closer to success. Meanwhile, EMTC's rivals, the Anglo-American Telegraph Company, were working on their own line. But when they suffered a catastrophic failure, losing 5,000 miles of cable in a single day, EMTC's line looked better and better. By 1866, after 5 years of work, they had succeeded. The first transatlantic telegraph message was sent, and the race was on to see who would dominate the new industry. But while telegraph cables could carry messages across the ocean, they weren't very useful unless there was someone on the other end to receive them. At first, nobody seemed interested in communicating with Europe. But that changed when Cyrus Field, the financial backer of the project, decided to take advantage of the publicity. In 1868, Field sent Queen Victoria a coded message, then published the key. Europe had entered the chat. The race was on. And this time, the prize was bigger than anyone had imagined. Field recruited the best minds in science and engineering to improve and expand the system. Among them was Nikola Tesla, who came to the company at the age of 20 with his designs for a wireless telegraph system. Tesla's ideas were revolutionary, but the company wasn't ready for them yet. And instead of pursuing his research, Tesla was put to work improving the existing systems. Still, Tesla's mind was on the future. While working on cable repairs in the summer of 1872, he devised a plan to secretly test his wireless telegraph idea. Without the knowledge of his bosses at EMTC, all he needed was a way to generate powerful electromagnetic waves, a device he had been working on in secret. Could it be that Tesla used the Mary Celeste to test his invention? He needed a ship to test his machine on. Was the Mary Celeste that ship? What if the captain and his family were brought on board under false pretenses? After all, there was no record of them ever booking passage on the ship. And what if the partially eaten dinner was a red herring, placed there to mislead investigators into thinking the family had abandoned ship? If Tesla wanted to test his invention, he needed a clear shot at the ocean, which would explain why the Mary Celeste took such an unusual route, steering further out to sea than usual. Could it be that Tesla's experimental machine interfered with the ship's navigation equipment? Maybe the strange behavior of the Mary Celeste and her crew can all be explained by Tesla's interference. And if the crew vanished at all, it was because they were sent forward in time, becoming lost in our own. Or perhaps they were sent back in time, disappearing into the distant past. But what do you think? Do you think Tesla's machine could have done this? Why did the crew disappear? Or did they? Let me know in the comments. And remember, this has been a daily exploration. Don't forget to come back for more.